I'm Sophia, 22 years old, and my story begins with the house my mother, Grace, left behind after she passed away. It's more than just a house. It's where all my mom and I's best memories are kept. My mother is a resilient and caring woman. Before discovering she had bowel cancer, she planned everything in detail. The house had been hers since before she met my father, James, and she always reminded me of its value. "Sophia, this house is yours. This will always be a safe place for you," she said with a gentle smile, even though her eyes hid the pain of her illness. My parents had a 10-year marriage, but when I was 9, my dad decided to leave the family to start a new life with Megan. There were no arguments. Dad just packed his bags and left, leaving Mom and I with our silent pain. He only kept one promise: setting up an account for me to go to college. That was probably his way of showing his responsibility, but his absence left an irreplaceable void. My mother worked tirelessly to take care of me. As a senior accountant, she earned enough money for us to live comfortably and even saved some money for difficult days. But when I was 14 years old, she received a cancer diagnosis. Instead of panicking, my mother decided to quit her job to focus on treatment, all because she wanted to live as long as possible to see me grow up. During the 4 years of fighting the disease, my mother always put my future plans first. She was strong, didn't complain, and did everything she could to keep me from worrying about finances. But cancer does not care about human determination. When I just turned 18 and was ready to enter college, my mother left me forever. My mother's house became the most precious inheritance, not only because of its material value, but also because it was a testament to her love and sacrifice for me. However, I did not know that that legacy would also be the beginning of all the turbulence in my life. After my mother's death, I entered the world of college with a heavy heart. However, the house my mother left behind is my only spiritual support. But at age 18, I was faced with a difficult decision. I couldn't sell my house because it was too valuable to me, but leaving it empty for all 4 years of college was also not a wise choice. In the midst of my confusion, my father, James, appeared with a solution. "Sophia, why don't you let us live here? We will pay all the bills and take care of the house so you can study in peace," he suggested one morning. Megan, his new wife, stood next to him and nodded in agreement, smiling gently as if to reassure me. In that moment, I felt hope. James and Megan, while not the family I always wanted, were supportive and willing to help me maintain the house. The first few months they lived with me really weren't bad. Megan was friendlier than before, and Lila, my half-sister, started calling me sister instead of the distant way she used to. I feel like maybe, finally, this imperfect family can become a home. However, I forgot an important lesson of American culture. Independence should not be sacrificed, even for family. The decision to allow them to live in the house laid the foundation for future troubles. Advice for Sophia in this situation is to remember that, although family is important, protecting your heritage and rights also needs to be a priority. Trusting too much in James and Megan without setting clear limits could cost her. American audiences can easily feel sympathy for Sophia. In a culture that values independence and personal ownership, allowing her father's new family to live in her mother's home is an honorable but vulnerable act. Sophia needs to understand that kindness should not come with self-sacrifice. She should set clear boundaries and protect her property rights legally, because not everyone will keep their promises. During my 4 years of college, I returned to my mother's house every vacation and summer. At that time, everything seemed fine. James and Megan took better care of the house than I expected. Megan cooked big dinners to welcome me, even making lasagna, which she said was my favorite. Lila, my half-sister, often drags me into her room, showing off her latest drawings or telling funny stories about school. I'm starting to think that maybe this arrangement is actually working. The holidays are always filled with warmth. The family decorated the Christmas tree together. James lifted Lila up to attach the star to the top of the tree, while Megan and I happily debated the use of tinsel. There are moments when I feel like I'm living in a normal family, where everyone really cares about each other. This makes me even more confident that I made the right decision to let them live in my mother's house. However, looking back, I realized I was too trusting and didn't set any boundaries. In American culture, ownership and independence are valued, and I did not defend my rights closely. I don't question the small changes in the house, new curtains, a different arrangement of furniture, or the gradual replacement of mom's things. All of that seems harmless, but it's a sign that they're taking over this space in their own way. Sophia should have realized that the house is not only a material asset, but also a spiritual legacy that her mother left behind. Advice for Sophia is that it is necessary to protect this heritage not only with care, but also with legal action, such as checking relevant documents and setting clear rules about ownership. In American culture, this is not only practical, but also a way to demonstrate independence and responsibility for oneself. After graduating from college, I returned home with excitement. I had a new job at Marshall and Brooks Financial, and an office with a view of downtown was waiting for me. Everything seems to be falling into place. When the taxi stopped in front of my mother's house, I felt a sense of familiarity fill my heart. Mom's rose bushes are blooming, although they look differently pruned than she usually does. As I walked up the aisle, dragging my suitcase behind me, I reached for the familiar key from my bag, ready to open the door and enjoy the comfort of my beloved home. But something strange happened. The door lock wouldn't open. I tried again, then tried again, but it still didn't work. Confused and a little nervous, I knocked on the door. Megan appeared, looking like she had just stepped out of the kitchen, flower in hand. Her surprised expression made me feel uneasy. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" Megan asked, her voice a bit broken. My answer was simple. I live here. But the atmosphere in the house, from my father James's eyes to Lila's distant attitude, made me realize everything had changed. When I asked about changing the lock, James awkwardly explained that he did it for security reasons, but it was clear he deliberately did not give me a new key. This was more than just a petty act, it was a sign of appropriation. In America, where property rights are highly valued, this action is a clear violation. It puts me, Sophia, in a position where I have to confront my own family to protect what belongs to me. What Megan said next shocked me even more. "Sophia, you've graduated. Maybe now is the time for you to find a place of your own." I felt betrayed, not only by Megan, but also by James, who was supposed to be on my side. American culture values fairness and respect in family relationships, but I clearly didn't get that. The advice for Sophia is to take immediate action, not only to protect her home ownership rights, but also to confirm that she is not someone who can be easily taken advantage of. A meeting with an attorney or legal action may be the necessary next step in this situation. After a strange conversation with James and Megan about changing the locks, the atmosphere in the house becomes tense. I tried to stay calm, but couldn't help but feel betrayed. This is my mother's house, the legacy she worked hard to leave for me, and yet now I have to explain my right to live in my own home. This feeling is completely wrong, especially in a society like America, where property ownership is protected and respected by law. The following weeks were like living in a hostile environment. Megan, who used to make my favorite lasagna, now shows coldness and even deliberately does things to make me feel redundant. She accidentally washed my clothes with different colored items, causing them to bleed, or prepared dinner without doing enough for me. Lila, who used to drag me into her room to show off her drawings, now calls me that girl when talking to friends on the phone. James, instead of standing up for me, quietly avoided any conflict. He didn't even look directly at me when I tried to ask about the situation. "Sophia, everyone is just trying to adapt," he said, but his averted gaze told a different story. This is not adaptation. This is appropriation. In American culture, where fairness and individual rights are valued, Megan's actions and James's indecisive attitude are unacceptable. Audiences can easily sympathize with Sophia because her story is a reminder of the importance of protecting one's rights and heritage, especially when faced with those willing to take advantage of one's power. Your kindness. Advice for Sophia is that she needs to act immediately. A frank discussion with James and Megan is necessary, but at the same time, she should also consider seeking legal advice to ensure her property rights are not being violated. In American culture, protecting one's property is not only accepted but encouraged. It is time for Sophia to set clear boundaries and assert her place in the house she deserves to call home. One weekend morning, I woke up to find the house completely silent, an unusual silence. There was no sound of frying pans from Megan's stove, no loud music from Lila's room, and no sound of my dad watching the news in the living room. When I checked around, I noticed that all signs of the family were gone. Lila's shoes were no longer cluttered by the door, Megan's usual handbag was no longer on the shelf, and James's car was no longer parked in the garage. I called James, but his phone kept going to voicemail. Then I called Megan, and she answered in a cold, challenging voice. "We're in the Maldives," she said, her tone arrogant, as if I should know that. "We didn't think it was necessary to inform you because, frankly, you don't need to know." I was shocked and outraged, but what was worse was when Megan continued. "Sophia, do you really think you have the right to be here? This is not her home. James and I have done everything to maintain this house, and you're just a parasite. She should find another place to live. When we return, I don't want to see you here anymore." Megan's words were not only insulting, but also the final straw. This is the house my mother worked all her life to buy, where she left her will clear that it belonged to me. But James stood on the sidelines, letting Megan say cruel words and continue the fake game. Faced with this truth, I know I cannot continue to stay silent. In American culture, protecting individual property rights is an important value. I immediately hired a locksmith to change all the locks in the house. I packed all of their belongings into boxes and took them to the garage, ready for their return. American audiences will definitely side with Sophia. Her story is not only about ownership, but also about self-respect and the responsibility to protect family heritage. Sophia's actions are not only reasonable, but also admirable, because she has set boundaries to protect herself from exploitation. Advice for Sophia is to continue to be steadfast in her decision. She needs to meet with a lawyer to ensure her ownership of the house is legally protected and to be prepared to face possible disputes. In American culture, this was not only a step in the right direction, but also a way for her to reassert control over her life. 2 weeks later, as I predicted, James and Megan returned. When I parked my car in front of my house after work, they were already waiting at the entrance. Megan blushed with anger, and James looked worried and tried to avoid my eyes. Lila stood away from them, looking down at the ground, as if trying to avoid getting involved in the incident. Their rental car was packed with stuff, and they obviously realized I had changed the locks and moved all their stuff out to the garage. As soon as I got out of the car, Megan started screaming, "Sophia, what the hell have you done? You have no right to change the locks or kick us out of our homes." She continued, her voice full of anger and menace. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and replied, "Megan, this is not your house. This is my mother's house, and she left it to me. I have allowed everyone to be here, but that does not mean you have the right to take over." James tried to intervene, his voice shaking. "Sophia, can we talk? Don't make things worse." But his eyes only reflected weakness. Once again, he did not dare to stand up to protect me or face the truth. In American culture, where property ownership is highly valued, it is not only reasonable but necessary for Sophia to stand up for her rights. Megan continued to argue that she just wanted a safe place for her family. But those words could not hide the fact that she had tried to take property that did not belong to her. Sophia needs to stand her ground. She did the right thing by changing the locks and moving their belongings out. Now is the time for her to seek legal assistance, if necessary, to legally and decisively protect her ownership of the house. Advice for Sophia is to continue to maintain calm and not allow anyone to take advantage of her kindness. Setting clear boundaries and protecting your rights is not only right, but also something that many American audiences will strongly support.